Greetings, A-listers. It is your friendly neighborhood mailman, the Trojanpear. And today we're going to finally get to one of my review specials of a Godzilla movie that is long overdue. That's right, today's special delivery is Shin Godzilla. So, let's get started. Shin Godzilla was a movie that came out a couple years ago. It was Japan's return, or Toho specifically's return to Godzilla in the movies. Their last movie had been Godzilla Final Wars, and that was back in 2004. There was no Godzilla movies released between that time and 2014 when the legendary Godzilla was released, which I did a review on that. After the success of that movie, Toho decided to work on a new Godzilla project, which is now referred to as Shin Godzilla. This movie was very successful in Japan. It made a lot of money, obviously, but it also won the Japanese Academy Award for Best Picture. You think, wow, that's interesting, a Godzilla movie that was that good. Well, when you actually look at the movie, some people say it's probably the second best Godzilla movie ever made behind the first one. For good reason, because this is, much like the first, a movie that has a sort of message within it. You probably wouldn't get it as much here in America, but it does have some correlation to things that were happening in Japan in those past few years, particularly with their natural disasters, the tsunami that happened a few years before this movie came out. Let's look at the back here. Got nice little pictures and whatnot. There is quote here says a reboot that is unquestionably Godzilla. Of course, that's somewhat of a reference to the 98 Godzilla, which was questionable as to whether or not that was Godzilla. That's the only quote I actually see on there. You do see the tagline at the bottom of this, which is a God incarnate, a city doomed. And it's just your basic picture of Godzilla. One of the most, I would say, horrific looking Godzillas, probably. It's a very different design, but Godzilla's always evolved its design over the years, so it's not like nothing new. The key is, what does he do that makes him resemble Godzilla? That's the most important thing. So let's read it. It says, from the mind behind Evangelion comes a hit larger than life. When a massive guild monster emerges from the deep and tears through the city, a government scrambles to save its citizens. A ragtag team of volunteers cuts through a web of red tape to discover the monster's weakness and its mysterious ties to a foreign superpower. I wonder who that could be. But time is not on their side. The greatest catastrophe to ever befall the world is about to evolve right before their very eyes. And this is one of the interesting things about it that is different from other Godzillas. It is an origin story, which is quite different, because Toho, in its history, has often rebooted the Godzilla franchise, but it has done it with the original Godzilla, King of the Monsters, or Gojira, as the original movie. So all the reboots were sequels to that movie. You would say from the Showa era, they had one series. You have the Heisei series was another era, and then Millennium. You've had multiple reboots within even that Millennial series. They were constantly refreshing the idea, but they always start with the concept that the original was the first one, and they were just rebooting from part two. This one actually takes the reboot from the first. Now, the Americans obviously rebooted the series from the beginning with 98 and 2014, but this is the first time that Toho's actually had a full-blown reboot, and it's a modern reboot. And one of the most interesting concepts about this movie that I would say is that it takes Godzilla and it, throughout the course of the movie, has him evolving. So what you see initially as Godzilla is not what you would expect to see, but then he evolves, looks more like you would expect Godzilla to look like. And he eventually gets bigger, more powerful as he evolves. He is clearly just a creature that is just not really looking to do anything specific other than be what he is, which is an animal. Specifically, you get this kind of idea, and I mean, this might be a spoiler to it, but the fact of the matter is, Godzilla is basically, if you want to just simplify it, he's basically a fish. Okay, now I know it's a little more complex than that, but Toho back in the 90s created a sort of background for Godzilla's origin before 1954 as to how he was created, what he was when he first started in the movie Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, that he was a dinosaur, a unique type of dinosaur called a Godzillasaurus, that he was mutated from the bomb, the atom bomb. So that, was something that's always been kind of where I've worked that idea from of what Godzilla is. But this totally changes that, in that he's something that's been mutated, but he basically, that would explain why he's got the fish gills and he's got the eyes, particularly early on, but as he evolves it kind of changes to where the eyes are very fish-like initially. It has a lot of qualities like that. But you would see, though, as he evolves and becomes what he is in his stages of evolution, it does kind of explain for the fact as to why Godzilla would be so aquatic, why he spends so much time in the water. Because, in the 92 Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, he was just a land dinosaur. Now, all of a sudden, he spends so much time underwater. In fact, in the 1954 movie, he was seen to be sleeping under the water. So you've got to have some sort of amphibious qualities, like gills or whatnot, to be able to survive underwater. But we let that go. Okay? Because there was no true origin in 1954. But then when you get that 92 one, it makes sense to some degree. But then you wonder, how is he able to breathe underwater? He was never able to do that before. This one talks about, basically, this is why he's underwater, because he has the gills originally, and he just kind of evolves. But as he evolves, he still retains that ability. So maybe there's still gills somehow. I don't know. They don't really explain it too much, but you kind of get the idea of what's going on with it. This movie is one that can be kind of difficult to sit through because there is a lot of political talking going on. But that's kind of the point of the movie. They're trying to show how messed up the political process and the government is, and how long it takes them to be able to respond and to get things done and to adequately prepare for these types of situations. That's why this movie was such a big deal, was because of that. And then you connected the fact that the disaster in this case is a giant monster. So, but it's close to about 2 hour movie. In fact, it is 2 hours right on the dot. So it's not a short movie. It's not terribly long, but it's not short. A lot of Godzilla movies are usually under 2 hours, unless of course you're talking about American movies, and it might be a little bit longer. But this movie, as I said, was released in Japan. It came out, and they sent the trailer out initially for Japan and released it in America as well. And I was very interested in seeing this movie, particularly because of the soundtrack to it. Now, the soundtrack for the trailer was used in the movie. In fact, the overall soundtrack mixes a lot of old school Godzilla sounds from its composers. Maybe just one of the composers, I don't know. I think it was just one composer that it used. But it used a lot of classic ones from older movies, but it also used some new ones as well. And the ones that it utilized in the new scores were wonderful. Very memorable scores. I think the soundtrack is a definite highlight for it. There are some parts where it feels it felt kind of weird initially for me, because when this movie was released initially, we were given like 3 days to be able to go see it in theaters, in select theaters. In my town here, I think it was 3 days. So we were fortunate enough to be able to have a screening for 3 days. It was not the best room. It was one of those little corner rooms where there's not a whole lot of seats, and some weird design on it. But we did get to go see it. In fact, once I found out it was there, I reserved the seats for the very first showing that it was going to have, because I wanted to make sure I got to see it. The quality of it was not as top-notch as a lot of their theater movies. In fact, I feel like the sound was not set up quite like a movie theater experience. So I was very disappointed on that. So I was very eager when it came out finally, about a year later on DVD, that I get to watch it again and see how it was. Also, you got the subtitle version, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I like the dub version. It's just, especially with this movie, because there are subtitles everywhere. It's like locations, people's titles, what they're saying. You're just littered with all these subtitles that you have to keep up with. So in the dub version, you don't have to worry about the speaking. You just worry about the titles and whatnot that they have to do of the people, which those are going to be there anyway. So, there's a lot of reading you have to do, and you kind of miss some details and whatnot when you're having to do so much of that. So that was definitely enjoyable of this, but I also got to see how the soundtrack actually mixed a little bit better, because I think there was something wrong with the way it was being done in the theater. So, yeah, this is definitely as good as advertised. Now, would I characterize this as a top 5? In terms of the quality, sure. Personally, however, I don't think I could do that. I don't even characterize 1954, the original, as my favorite. A lot of people say that's my favorite. Well, yeah, it might be the best one, but I don't know that I would call it my favorite. In fact, I know I wouldn't. The same with this. It's good, though. It's definitely in the upper echelon rather than the lower echelon of Godzilla movies. I mean, there are some movies that might be considered garbage, as far as their quality, but I like them. The example of a movie that I like that's not a good movie, Godzilla vs. Gigan. That's one I grew up with. I think it's an enjoyable movie. There's a lot of people that hate that movie, and it's also a poorly done movie. A lot of stock footage and other issues with the movie. But I actually like that movie better than the Megalon one, which might be a more fun version of that. So, I don't know. Would I characterize that as a top tier movie? No, but it's definitely higher than probably some movies that might be better quality. So, uh, I don't know for sure. I haven't really updated my top 10, my list of all time favorites. Maybe this might get a top 10. Definitely not top 5. I would not put it in top 5, but maybe I would put it in the top 10 Godzilla movies, my top 10 favorite. I might do that one day where I talk about ranking all these Godzilla movies, but it's good. If you're a fan of Godzilla, I think you should like this. Now, there's a lot of people who think if it's not Showa era Godzilla, it's garbage or it's boring. If Godzilla's not in there 85 of 90 minutes, it's junk. But how many movies really, honestly, do that were really that good anyway? You've got to have some kind of story arc element in it. I think that's people that live off of nostalgia, and that's fine and all. But to say that these movies are crap is you're missing it with Godzilla. You know, I understand '98. That has definite problems. I don't like that movie. But when you want to hate on movies like this movie or the 2014 movie, just because of some minor issues that you have with it, I don't get that. I think in a lot of cases people are just hating on it because they don't like how Godzilla has evolved in this, and I don't think they're ever going to truly be happy. They will hate on the animated movies, the anime movies that are coming out. I'm going to do that when the third one comes out and just talk about all three in general. I will say, however, those that don't like that, there's some legitimacy to that, though. I will say that. But with this and 2014, those are good movies. The gripes that people have a lot of times in those movies are not huge. I mean, you can't say that this is a garbage movie. Now, maybe you don't like it as much. That's fine. But these are good movies. This is a good movie. This is a well-made movie. It's an enjoyable movie. Can it be boring? Sure. Sure. If that's, listening to the government side of it's not your forte, that's fine. I get it. But just to say that it's to complain about the design and the effects and whatnot, or the soundtrack, I mean, it's got some really good elements to it. So I enjoy it for what it is. I would not characterize it. If you're a fan of Godzilla, as I am, you have a hard time not enjoying any Godzilla movie. Now, there's legitimate reasons not to like. But for the most part, Godzilla, you're a fan for a reason. And you enjoy it in the good times and in the bad. And that's what I do. And I think this is one of those good moments in the Godzilla history. Next time, we'll look at the King of the Monsters trailer, or we'll probably do another A-list video. Whichever it is, I look forward to seeing you next time. Blessings. Bye-bye.